My people, welcome to Rants Randomness. I'm your host, Luvvie and Jones, New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and professional troublemaker. And I'm here to share dope conversations that will give you something to think about, help you smile, and feel empowered to do what you feel compelled to do. So let's get into it. I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation. Today, I'm talking to the amazing Brandon Stanton. He's the creator behind the popular photo storytelling platform, Humans of New York. After being fired from his job as a bond trader in Chicago, Brandon moved to New York City to create a photographic census of the city. The blog, started in 2010, features portraits of people in New York City, along with conversations of the people he photographs. In 2014, Brandon took the blog abroad, featuring stories from all over the world, and he was invited to the Oval Office to photograph and interview President Barack Obama in 2015. He's the author of 2 #1 New York Times bestselling books, Humans of New York and Humans of New York Stories, and his latest book, Humans. As of this recording, Brandon is finishing up a week of sharing Tattletales from Tanqueray, a series of stories and images from my queen, Stephanie, aka Lady Tanqueray. We're talking about all that series. We're talking about Brandon, his story, how he started doing this work, and when he decided to use this platform in this way. During our conversation, we cover what he considers a stroke of luck that really kicked off Humans of New York to be what it is now. We cover how him being lost in his early 20s actually led him to this place. And honestly, we talk about Stephanie and what she's going through, how she's been receiving all the love everyone's been given. Honestly, this conversation is one of my favorites that I've ever had on this podcast. So you're in for a treat. Jump in. Before we jump into the interview, I want to make sure the Rants fam knows that my new book, Professional Troublemaker, The Fear Fighter Manual, comes out on March 2nd, 2021, and it's available for pre-order right now. I wrote this book because everything great in my life has come as a result of me choosing to be a professional troublemaker, from feeling afraid and choosing to do the scary thing anyway. We don't need to make ourselves fearless, because I don't think that exists. I think what being fearless means is being afraid and doing it anyway. We need to learn to fight the fear and imposter syndrome that we feel and use it as fuel to become better versions of ourselves. The things that I'm talking about in this book will take you from being a fear hider to a fear fighter. And Lord knows, we got a lot of things that bring up fear right now. So, pre-order this book. I want it to be a #1 New York Times bestseller. Let's do it again. I need your help to do it. So go to professionaltroublemakerbook.com to learn more and to place an order. Yo, Brandon, this is actually epic. Like, this is like epic shit. I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm interviewing you.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, and it's the perfect time, right?
It is can I just say this last week has been insane.
Insane for a lot of reasons. I'm glad that the Tanqueray story is a good insanity. There's been a lot of good insanity and a lot of bad insanity going on as well in this world. So I'm glad that Tanqueray could provide a little bit of a reprieve this week. I think everybody needed it.
Everybody needed it in this moment. We've been cheering along. It's like a whole thing, but this interview is even actually beyond her. Like, I think Tanqueray is kind of like the best of Humans of New York in how it presents, but I've actually been following you since I remember before you had, I think you were at like 700,000 followers on Facebook.
Yeah, well, so that was pretty early.
I remember because
it sounds like a huge number, but it was early. Yeah.
That's pretty early. So I've actually been following this work for a minute. So on Rants, I like to always drill in, like even beyond the work of it all. Like I'm always fascinated to find out how the whole thing happened, because people see your 11 million Instagram followers and they see, I don't even know how many you got on Facebook right now. But
right. I think it's 18. I don't know. It's I guess when you get up to a certain level, the individual numbers kind of become meaningless. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of
people following you. So I'm curious, like, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
what did I want to be when I grow up? Like the first memory I have is wanting to be a marine biologist because I liked going whenever we went to the beach. I liked kind of catching fish and shells, and I found out that there was an occupation where you could just kind of study animal life or marine life, and so that was my first thing. But that was my very young one. As I got older, I don't know, like. I think, part of my arc and I think the arc of so many people, in their late teens, early 20s, I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And, I felt like I was a very creative person. I wanted to do something creative, but it's very hard. This was before social media too.
Right.
So I think maybe social media and the success of things like Humans of New York, things like your podcast and your book and your work, have kind of given a clearer path for people to follow if they want to do something creative. But, in the early 2000s, late 90s, when you feel like a creative person and you're looking at the pathways in front of you, go to college, get this degree, go get this job, this entry-level job, work your way up to that. It's like, it was kind of, a tough for a creative soul to kind of find their place and to know exactly what to do. I was in school all day. I was studying, these different subjects that I didn't see how they really applied to the things that I wanted to do in life. And I was just confused. I really didn't know. It was kind of a dark time in my late teens, early 20s, a lot of drug use. A lot of not feeling like I fit in and not knowing what I wanted to do.
And where did you go to school?
So I went to the University of Georgia, flunked out, went to Georgia Perimeter Community College, which probably I got, that I always say, like, I think my best education came from there. Did well there, went back to the University of Georgia, graduated from there.
What major? What degree?
History, and I still love history. History is a passion. When I first went to University of Georgia, I was studying business. Again, I didn't really know what to do. I was just kind of being like shuffled along the path of like, okay, don't know what I do, might as well get some security in my life. And then when I flunked out, I was like, okay, I made such bad grades in college. Like, if I go back now, like I just want to graduate. So I might as well pick something that I'm really passionate about. And I really enjoyed reading history at the time. So that's what I chose.
I think there's something that a lot of successful people have in common is a lot of us did shit in college sometimes. Like,
well, I mean, here's why. It's because I think if you want to build something, and you want to kind of go your own way and, do something outside the box, there's nothing more anathema to that than sitting in class, checking boxes, going down this checklist of assignments and things that you have to do. The cast of mind that will later become an entrepreneur or somebody who builds their own thing is naturally going to rebel against that very, very hard.
Yeah.
Because you want to be out putting things together and constructing something, and creating something. And having every slot of your day and every slot of time filled up with a list of tasks that you have to accomplish is naturally going to cause friction with that cast of mind. And I think that's probably why people who later on go into a field or a profession that's creative, later on build something or organize something, do so poorly in college. Is just because the cast of mind that is required to take a huge risk in face of a monstrous amount of uncertainty is naturally not going to do well in an environment where everything's structured for you.
I think the best things that we learn are outside of school, like the best education. Like, I think for me, college was actually more about the connections that I made and who I became because of the experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily because of the classes that I took.
Right.
I was supposed to be a psychologist.
Yeah.
Clearly that didn't happen.
I'm sure there's elements of that in what you do. But, for me, it's like, I still got a lot of my education from books. That So, outside of college, definitely, and I'm sure that in your framing of it is the same way, didn't mean outside of books for me. The first time I was going through school, I viewed all kinds of I viewed book learning, in as far as like textbooks and stuff, as something that was kind of below me. In that I didn't want to just read what other people told me to read. I didn't want to study and memorize facts so I could regurgitate A, B, and C on the test. So I kind of rebelled against books and I mean like nonfiction books. I enjoyed the novel like everybody, as a way of educating myself. And then when I dropped out of college, and then I went to Perimeter College, Georgia Perimeter College, community college. I was surrounded by people who maybe they had children at a young age. Maybe they were from families of immigrants. They were less privileged. And for them, education wasn't this rite of passage that you got shuffled along, fulfilling the wishes of your parents. Like, education was something that they were clawing for and striving for in order to better their lives. And so being in this environment really reframed my view of education. And education is something outside of school. It is a thing unto itself. And during that time period, I became very dedicated to educating myself. But the difference being the books that I read and the things that I studied were going to come from my own volition. They were going to be something that I pursued based on my own itinerary, my own agenda, that the books that I chose to read were going to be based on my own curiosities. And then once I made that pivot, I started reading a lot. I read 100 pages a day for years. So education became very important to me. But it was education based on my own syllabus, my own volition, and not top-down structured education.
That makes a lot of sense. So when you graduated, what was your next move?
So graduated with a history degree, and it didn't solve a whole lot of my underlying problems of, again, feeling like a creative person, wanting to do something creative. At that time in college, I was attempting to make a documentary, the worst documentary anyone's ever made. I borrowed a camera from my friend. I didn't even know anything about audio. You'll see you've got these nice headphones with these with this microphone. I'm still not very proficient with audio, clearly. But I just love shooting. And it really kind of has echoes of what later came in Humans of New York. I just borrowed my friend's camera and I filmed like 1,000 hours. I'm like, oh, this is great. Look at this tree. Like, I'll figure out how to get this into my movie. It's beautiful. You know what I mean? And like, I even remember, because I started out, I was making the documentary on student athletes. I chose like 3 very different. One of them was the most famous player on our football team. The other was a 14-year-old prodigy golfer, and the other was he wasn't a student. He worked at the school. He was this 80-year-old man, probably younger than that at the time. He was probably about a 70-year-old man. And he would go in, he was kind of a legend. He would go into the gym every single day he looked like Albert Einstein. He wore these goggles and he wore the same blue sweatshirt every single day. And he shot basketballs like this. He would take one hand behind his head and throw it over there like that. And he was a legend because this man could sink 100 3-point shots in a row. He would just like clock it, and they always went in. His name was Tom. He worked in the math library. So I profiled these 3 different athletes, and I was interviewing them. Horrible interviews, horrible audio. And to kind of figure out what it was that they all had in common that kind of made them excellent. And nothing ever came of that, but it did get the camera in my hand, get me filming and in love with filming. And then I even kind of went off in echoes of what later become Humans of New York. I even kind of started, stopping random people on the street and interviewing them and be like, oh, maybe I can figure this into my movie later. Maybe I can just figure, because I was just filming everything. And so I graduated, and I got this bucket full of horrible footage that I still have with me. But still, again, social media didn't exist. The path for an artist was less clear. and more structured in the same way that I rebelled against structure before. You had to go through a system, whether that's the music industry system or the Hollywood system, to be an artist. You had to be ordained and chosen and curated and picked by tastemakers who chose you out of MFA programs. Like the word art sounded glamorous, but the pathway to art wasn't much more independently driven, or it didn't allow for as much freedom as it does today. And so I felt stuck. I had a call from a friend that he actually just saw him yesterday, still a very good friend of mine, who had studied finance his entire life. And he said, I was telling him I didn't really know what to do. And he goes, well, you don't have a finance degree, but I think you would be an excellent bond trader. That's what he was doing at the time. And if you want, I can get you an interview. And not knowing what I was going to do, I said, okay, that's great. So I went and I did the interview. Beforehand, remember I said I was very into education at that time. I read every book on the market I possibly could. So by the time I went into that interview, because I had a history degree, right. By the time I went in that interview, I'd read like 100 books, so everything I could find, just so I was ready. Got that job, did it for about 2 years. This was around 2008. And it was very exciting. It was very high pressure, high stakes, and interesting, almost too interesting. I was like obsessed with it in an unhealthy way. And I did that for about 2 years. 2008 happened, which was a financial crisis. Ended up getting fired. And then I kind of had this moment where I kind of looked at my path and said, okay, 3 years ago, you were trying to make a film. You wanted to do something creative. Then for the past 2 years, you've been really pursuing money for money's sake. I had this narrative in my head, I'm going to make my money first, and then I'm going to pivot and I'm going to do something creative. What I'm doing now isn't who I am. What I'm doing now is just to get some security, to get some firm footing under my feet so that I can later on be who I am.
Right.
But I've done this for 2 years, and all I've been thinking about is the process of making money. And that's what trading is. It's, we were trading bonds, so you're trading money to make money. I was thinking about money all day long. And 2 years had gone by and I didn't really have anything to show for it. I got fired. I wasn't performing well. And, at that point, I made the decision that I'm just going to stop thinking about money and making money and just focus on my time. That I'm going to, instead of trying to make so much money that I owned all my time, I was going to try to make just enough money to where I could do what I wanted to do all day long. And at the time, that was photography. I had bought a camera to relieve the stress of work because it was going so poorly. I'd only been photographing for a few months, but I loved it. It kind of felt like the same way I did in college. I loved being out and interacting with the world. Like there's like this physical energy exchange, and I missed that during COVID. You know what I mean? Because I'm doing the remote interviews, which are great and in many ways the most popular thing I've ever done. But I do miss the being out on the street and interacting with the world and exchanging energy, not only with other people, but with the world. It was such a satisfying thing to do. You know what I mean? Not what came out of it, not the money or the audience that came out of it. The act itself was very satisfying, very nourishing. And I wanted to replicate it. I want to do this all day long. And so I made the decision, I am just going to figure out how to structure my life so where I could photograph all day long. And that's what Humans in New York was. It was my very amateurish, very naive, very, very idealistic idea of how I was going to photograph all day long. I was going to create some big project that people were going to be interested in and people were going to pay attention to. And I don't know how it's going to make money. I have no idea. Maybe there will be an article about it somewhere and then people will notice it and I can sell my photos. So it wasn't very fleshed out.
What year was this?
2010.
How old were you?
26.
Wow.
Yeah, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary. It's a time of reflection. November 4th, 2010 was when I moved to New York full time. And I mean, one of the interesting things, I mean, there are a couple interesting things about Humans of New York, is that when I decided to do it full time, I had very little photography experience, and I'd never been to New York before. You know, I was at the age of 26. I saw New York City for the first time 2 months before I moved there. And remember, at the time, I was kind of traveling around photographing, and I'd kind of gotten into and started focusing on taking photos of people, because I'm trying to figure out how I can structure my life to where I can photograph all day long.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what can I do? What can I do that's interesting? What can I do that's different? And I started out like every photographer: urban decay, nature shots, graffiti. Do you know what I mean? And then I started taking pictures of people, candid shots, which were a little bit more unique and a little bit more interesting. And then I was so excited by these that I started stopping people, like really interesting people, and asking them if I could take their photos and taking portraits of them. And I remember I posted one of them on Facebook. I was just posting them on my personal Facebook account at this time.
Yeah.
And I remember a photographer friend of mine wrote, "Oh, that's a beautiful street portrait." And I said, "Street portraits? Oh, street portraits are a thing. I'm gonna make street. That's who I am. That's what I do. I make street portraits." And so from that moment on, I just started stopping people on the street, asking for their photos. Again, just posting it on my personal profile. Didn't really have a plan other than photographing all day long. Got to New York City, and there's this island called Manhattan that is so packed with people that you can't walk 10 feet.
Oh my God, yes.
And you don't need a car, because I was broke. You can walk anywhere. And I was like, okay, if there's any place, and there's all types of people, every type of person in the world in Manhattan. And, and I say Manhattan, I was photographing all over New York, but, that island, the idea of the island, the island where the entire world is, and they're all packed in together, and they're figuring it out, and they're figuring out how to live together. You know what I mean? It's romantic. And so, I decided to move to New York City with the goal of photographing 10,000 people on the streets of New York. And that was it. That was the beginning of Humans of New York.
When did you start the Facebook page, the official Facebook page?
I was talking with my friend about that last night. The same friend who got me the job in Chicago. His father was one of these guys that, he's always trying to mentor the kids around him, because he was an entrepreneur. And Mike Schaefer was his name. And I remember I'd been in New York for a few months at that time, and I was working all day, every day. I didn't know anybody. I was living in a sublease with 3 people that I didn't know in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And, I was just working all day long. I get emotional every time I talk about this period, because it's just like the feelings that I felt back then just like come up to the surface. But it was like, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any money. I was working on something that a lot of people thought was ridiculous and didn't make sense. And I was doing it all day, every single day, and nothing was really coming of it. I was taking thousands of portraits. And so, like, this Mike Schaefer is a friend of mine. He's my friend's dad. And I was just posting all these pictures on my Facebook page. And he was like, "Oh, you need to start a page." And I was like, well, I already put my stuff on Facebook. And he was like, no. There's this thing called a page. It's like, you got to have your own page for Humans of New York. And so I started this page. I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I started just posting. And that was probably, and I was talking with my friend about this last night, like that was probably my biggest stroke of luck. We were talking about what was luck, what was skill, and when you've struggled as hard as I have to make something work, and tried so many things and failed at so many things and just kept trying, it's very hard to attribute things to luck. It's like, well, what do you mean? I suffered and I struggled so hard, and so much of what I tried failed, and I just kept trying until things worked. And it's so hard, to say, like, what do you mean I was lucky? Like, I failed so many times. I just kept going. I just kept banging my head against the wall. But then you really, you do look back and you realize there were just moments, right place, right time. And I was one of the very first Facebook pages. And this was the time, I remember the biggest Facebook page that I could find when I made a Facebook page was Gay Marriage USA. The owner of it, Murray, became a good friend of mine. I still very much value and appreciate and thankful to that man, because he shared a couple early Humans of New York posts of gay people that I took of photos of from the Gay Pride Parade. And like, so of my first 3,000 followers, 2/3 of them were from the gay community. And I mean, that first following's the hardest to get.
Yes.
So like when I first created my page, like the biggest example of a page, he had 100,000 followers. Like that was the biggest Facebook page out there. And so like I was that early, and I just started posting every single day. And so, I just Humans of New York and got out in a new technology and a new ecosystem very early. And the moment I saw that it was getting traction, I just never looked back. I posted, I worked every day, and I posted 4 or 5 times every single day for years because I knew it was working. And like when you've been in a place where, that darkness of being out there on the limb, you move to New York City, you don't know anybody, you don't have any money, you're not sure if it's going to work, and you have to fight those voices every single day. And, you go home, and there's just, my room had nothing but a mattress on the floor. I didn't even have a bed. It was a mattress on the floor, didn't have anything on the walls. I didn't want to be in that room just worrying about everything not working. So, just go out and back and work. And when you've been in that dark place, I remember darkest time of my life was Christmas holiday. That first year I was in New York, because I knew I knew 2 people in New York, and they both went home during that time. And I was completely alone, just completely alone for 2 weeks. And it was the holiday season. I remember I spent Christmas Eve at a diner alone. It's like when you felt that, and when you felt that darkness, and then things start to work, and you start to get this traction, you start to move forward, like you just run, you hit that lane so hard, you know what I mean? Because it's like in many ways you're running from that feeling, I can't go back there. It's working. All of this loneliness, all of this uncertainty, all of this risk-taking and sadness, there was a reason for it. Yes. And now it's working. Something's coming out of it. And just don't look back, and just go. Just go. Just run. And that's what I did for years. And, eventually I had to hit a point where I had to unwind some from that. I had to unwind some from that psychology of if you stop for a second, it's all going to disappear. You know what I mean? It's like it's if you stop for a second, you're going to fall back to that. Yes,
to that place. When you started approaching people on the street, how do you get, what is the prompt that you give them? What is the thing that allowed them to start talking? Because I think early on, to your point, street photography was not considered a thing, really. And I'm sure people were like, who's this random guy approaching me? How did you actually get people to tell you something?
Right. So I will say that street photography was a thing. There's a very long and storied history of photographers that are much more talented than I am, taking these beautiful candid shots of people on the street. What was new, you never know. You never want to say new, because you've always got ancestors, even if you don't know about them. There's people who did. Abraham Lincoln said, I think everything gets attributed to Lincoln, right? But I'm almost I'm almost am positive that he said books serve to show young people that those wonderful original thoughts of theirs aren't so original after all.
That part.
Yeah. And so it's, there's always somebody who did what you were doing. But as far as what was on my radar and what was on my perspective, there was nobody ever who stopped random people and put them through very serious interviews, at least not in a systematic way every day. I was doing with Humans of New York. So that was new. It was the process of stopping somebody and not only taking their photo, and all of this was an evolution, because remember, I moved to New York just to take pictures of people, and that's all I did for a long time. And then I started adding little quotes, and then the interviews got longer and longer. And I mean, and you can just line the 3 books that I've written, each one published 3 days or 3 years apart, and see the evolution of the work. Mm-hmm. It goes from 90% photos with one little line of text under them to 90% text, where it's just like a page full of text and a photo. And then look at Tanqueray. I mean, and Tanqueray is 12,000 words. And so it's gone. The evolution has been from one of photography to storytelling, and within the storytelling arc, it's gone from very superficial to much deeper. Yeah. And that's something I'm still improving at, and I'm still getting better at. But the thing was how do you stop somebody, a random person, and make them feel comfortable, put them in a place where they are comfortable sharing. Where they're comfortable opening up in a way that you need a person to open up to tell their story well. It's like, it's to really find out the beauty and the depth and the struggle and the nuance of a person's story. It requires honesty, because, people tend to like speak in generalizations, and they protect themselves in generalizations. Like, what's your biggest struggle right now? Oh, work-life balance. Okay, well, what specifically are you having a hard time balancing? Oh, everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, but like in order to get somebody's story, you have to know what's singular and specific to them, which requires going down beneath generalities, which requires honesty, which requires an environment where the person feels comfortable. So the first skill that I really had to develop wasn't the interviewing skill itself. That's secondary. It's important, but you can't even begin that unless you can establish the rapport that's necessary to have an honest interview.
Correct.
And that was the trick. That was the figuring out how to take a random stranger and make them feel comfortable enough in a very short amount of time to have a very deep and impactful conversation with you.
Rants fam, if you haven't joined us in Love Nation and become a Love Cousin yet, well, what are you waiting for? Love Nation is my free community that is a safe space in the dumpster fire world. It is the place for the most thoughtful, funny, most chill-deficient people on the interwebs. We're a community that comes together to make each other better with curated conversations, opportunities to connect, and challenges to help us transform and do better in every area of our lives. You gotta stop sitting on this and come into lovenation.com and get signed up. We don't steal your data in here, okay? Ain't no evil overlord in Love Nation. You can download the app in the App Store or on Android and come through. So become a Love Cousin. All right, back to the podcast. So let's say you saw me on the street.
Yeah.
And you stopped me. Yeah. Because I had on like an interesting hat or whatever.
Okay. You do.
How would you approach me?
So what I learned is it's much more about energy than it is about what you say. Like when I first began, I was like trying all of these different things. I was trying to say all of these different things. Maybe if I say the correct thing, then this person will allow me to interview them. Then I realized, while I was so focused on the words that I was saying, I was gradually getting less and less nervous and more calm as I was going on. And people started saying yes, not because my words were changing, but because my energy was changing. By far the most important thing is to approach somebody with an energy of calmness. And it's very hard to attain in an interaction between two strangers because the dominant feeling when you first meet somebody that you're unfamiliar with is suspicion, kind of fear, especially if it's on a sidewalk or a street.
Yeah.
So when you're coming at somebody with a source of calm, that's the first step to helping them feel calm. And so it's about the pace, it's about, excuse me. It's not like, oh, excuse me, can I ask you a question? Not that. It's like, excuse me. I was wondering if there was any way that I can take your photograph. I run a website. It's called Humans of New York. And basically what I do is I photograph people all over New York City. And I learn a little bit about everyone that I photograph. And I was wondering if there's any way that I could take your photo and ask you a few questions. Yeah. Now in New York City, most of the time they've heard of Humans of New York, which helps a lot.
Right.
But I've done this in 40 different countries around the world. I've done this, pretty much everywhere. So, some people think, oh, of course it's easy for you to do it because people know, your work is well known and people know who you are. But that's not true everywhere.
I actually don't think a lot of people know what you look like, Brandon.
Which is beautiful. I was just thinking about that today. I'm was out and I was kind of enjoying a coffee with my family and nobody came up to me. And it's just like, and I just thought how it's something that I really value and it's something I struggle with. I wonder the correct mix of putting myself, Brandon Stanton, on the blog. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if I've gone too far in the other direction because I've never posted a picture of myself on the blog. I mean, I think the last picture I posted of myself was years ago.
The last picture I remember seeing of you is like you in like a bubble jacket with your hat backwards.
Yeah. And I haven't worn a backwards hat in years. And so it's like, it's so good for so many different reasons. Like, I do not think Humans of New York would have become Humans of New York if it was called Brandon Stanton's Photography. Agreed. If my Instagram was Brandon Stanton and I was posting the exact same thing, it wouldn't have become what it is. And I still haven't put my finger on it, but the act of disappearing that I've done, the fact that Humans of New York does not contain any of my opinions. It does not contain any of my thoughts. It is my best ability, and you can never fully get out of the way of your own work. I'm choosing the questions to ask. I'm choosing the answers to include. But as much as possible, becoming a channel for another person to express themselves and to be portrayed. And that requires disappearing. And the more that I've been able to do that, the bigger Humans of New York has become, the more powerful and more impactful it has become. But Humans of New York, the name, not Brandon Stanton. And when people do come up to me on the street, even big fans, nobody says, are you Brandon Stanton? Some people do occasionally, but almost always it's, are you Humans of New York? Are you Humans of New York? Do you know what I mean? And so it's like that. And it's really a beautiful thing because Humans of New York brings in all kinds of people who follow it. And there's nobody who is turned away by my opinion. There's nobody who is turned away by my personality. And it doesn't pollute the work. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm a flawed person. We're all flawed people. If I put down every thought that I had, there'd just be so many things that like 24 hours later, I'd be like, why did I write that?
Why did I say it?
Yeah. You know what I mean? And but I don't. And not even in the comment section, like I've been commenting occasionally on the Tanqueray post. And even then, like afterwards, I'm like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have written. You know what I mean? It's like, there is such a discomfort for putting my own thoughts because like, I want Humans of New York to be immune from me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I want it to be bigger than me, and I don't want to pull it down with my own weaknesses and my own flaws. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
And it requires removing myself from it. And then,
It's actually funny because so my book that came out, I'm judging you came out 4 years ago, but I remember I actually had to battle with my publishers because they wanted to put me on the cover.
Oh,
and I
wow.
said, I need to not be on the cover
Yeah.
because I need to disappear in the words. Because if I'm on the cover, it wouldn't sell the numbers that it sold because somebody would be like, oh, that's a book for Black girls.
Yeah.
If they saw me. But I remember getting a story from a bookseller who said this like burly white dude with tattoos saw my book cover through the window and came in and bought 2 copies.
Interesting.
And I'm like, if I was on the cover, he wouldn't stop in and be like, that book might actually speak to me. So I totally understand the value of letting the work speak before you do. Before all the things that come with it. Because if people saw Brandon Stanton's Human of New York or Brandon Stanton's photo blog and they see like this white dude with a hat on, we will have ideas of what it's going to be in it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's so true. And it's just like, yeah. And I even used to like put my own voice occasionally in there. Like I would put in quotes a question that I asked early on in Humans of New York. And then I even, stopped doing that. And it's really amazing too. It's like, I like to think philosophically about why Humans of New York works. What is it about it? And okay, so if I, obviously I've worked 10 years obsessively on this craft. So, there's some craftsmanship there, but beyond that, it's like, okay, so it's one of the most successful things on social media, but it breaks every social media rule. I don't get in and at first it's long form. It's the maximum amount. People say you want to get somebody's attention, keep it short, I'm asking for people's time every single time Humans of New York comes on there. It takes a minute and a half at least to read these stories. It's taking, Tanqueray's stories, 24 single page space pages, and people are coming along on that journey. I don't interact in the comment section. Another huge, anti-social media no. It really breaks all the rules. I haven't branded myself. It works. And why is it that it works so well? There's this massive community that the comment section is completely bustling and vibrant without my participation. And I think it comes down to the inherent value of a story. It's the stories build community. Stories keep people engaged, and stories do all of the things better than an individual or a personality can do. So instead of basing the following on a personality, which I think is the go-to for Instagram, it's pretty much how all of social media works. Is here's what I had for lunch today, here's where I wore yesterday, which is fine because people love it. People love personalities. And somehow this website that I make has worked without any personality from me. Zero. And what is it? And it's something about the power of a story. Well-told story. And so that's what I focus on.
I think well-told stories do break most rules. A lot of times they say online, people have no attention span, right? Like, so you're saying long form. You have this series that insists on people turn on their notifications. I don't turn on my notifications for any accounts on social media, not even my own or my company's, but yours, Humans of New York.
Thank you.
And it's because the power of the stories are staring. One of my favorite series that you did was when you went to Rwanda.
Right.
That was one of the most stunning pieces of storytelling I have ever seen. And Brandon went to Rwanda and basically told the story of survivors of the Rwandan genocide over a series of how many posts was that?
It was about, each story was multiple posts, and I interviewed about 10 different survivors. And you'll remember the theme was people who rescued other people. That was the theme that I focused on, was rescuers. So these were members of the Hutu population who did not participate in the genocide, men beyond that risk their own lives by attempting to shelter people or save other lives. So that was the theme of it.
What made you go with that theme?
Just it's like, how are you going to do it differently? How are you going to? So I went to Rwanda, and this is a story, a beautiful country, by the way. I mean, Rwanda is.
It's on my list.
Oh man, and it's such an amazing story about what's happened, what Paul Kagame has done, and the turnaround of that country. Everyone should go there. But when you go there, and there's this. I mean, I don't think anything like that has happened in such contemporary history. This was not long ago at all, and these people.
94.
These people are still living and they're still walking around. And so it's just the story completely cloaks the country. The story of the genocide completely cloaks the country. And it's hard to say the word Rwanda without thinking about the genocide. And so it's like, how do you tell a story of what happened that doesn't just lean into every lens that has been put upon this country? Do you know what I mean? It's the tragedy and the brutality of it. And so to me, the most interesting angle was, okay, who are the people that didn't go along? Who are the people that resisted all the social pressure to go along with what was happening? I'm going to tell the story of the country through these individuals. And so it was just an instinct I had, and I followed it, and it turned out great.
I just remember reading it and wondering how you were able to tell the story. Like when you were speaking to these people who are living history, how did you keep composure? How do you feel the day after you do it, or even the hours after you do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's different levels. I mean, there's part of me that I imagine is akin to like a therapist, where I've heard so many tough stories that I have probably a little bit of an ability to stay even keeled in the face of hearing about, tragedy and trauma. But then, there's a different tier where it's so overwhelming that yes, it can't help but seriously impact me. Rwanda, the pediatric cancer series on refugees, where it's just like, oh my God, I cannot believe these people. It's like you're watching a horror movie, but it's real. You know what I mean? It's like if somebody was to fictionalize a horror movie, with just you take your protagonist and just put them through the most traumatic and scary things you can possibly imagine. Here's an individual in front of you telling their life history, and they've gone through these actual things, and then it's coming up when they're telling you, and they're going back to that place, and you're sitting there going back to that place with them. Mm-hmm. Claudine, sole survivor of her family with 7 to 8 siblings, and telling in detail how it's in the book. She's somebody that I've kept in touch with, but yeah, she saw her whole family get killed, and I mean, it wasn't in one moment either. A few of them escaped, and one by one they were caught, and at different times it was and she was the only one who survived, and walking through that with her. It's tough. There's something also redemptive and cleansing about telling the story, not only for me, but for the person involved. That suddenly, remember when we were talking about when, the feeling of like being in New York, or the feeling of just starting out as an artist and being in this like very dark place.
Yeah.
And the reason that first dose of success is just such an amazing sense of euphoria is because it somehow validates all the loneliness and pain that you went through, that you carried this extreme doubt the entire time that nothing was going to come of it. And then suddenly something comes from it, and like everything that you did that other people were laughing at suddenly had meaning.
It makes sense.
It's the same thing with a story, that the process of framing somebody's history and their pain and their suffering into a narrative that can reach out and have meaning for other people, that can serve as a survival guide to other people, that can give comfort to other people, it has a redemptive quality because it takes something that was previously unexplainable and gives it meaning. And so, I think one of the things that helps from getting overwhelmed in these situations is knowing that there is a utility to it, that you're able to do something. I feel like you really get compassion fatigue and empathy fatigue, which is an actual term and an actual definition in the world of, NGOs and nonprofits and people who are on the front lines trying to help people.
Yeah.
Is the feeling that you're not making a difference, that the feeling that there's so many problems and so much suffering, and that you are planting yourself in the middle of so many people suffering, and you're not seeing the situation change as quickly as you would hope, in a way that really wears you down. Having Humans of New York as a platform and being able to share these people's journeys and seeing the impact and the healing that they are afforded through the process is also very nourishing for me. And knowing that is the end point of the process helps the process, even no matter how emotionally taxing it is, be more bearable.
That's real. And that is no more clear than in the story of Lady Tanqueray, Stephanie.
Nice pivot.
She has taken the world by storm, like in the middle of a global pandemic, as the world is basically on fire in different ways. We're finding joy in this woman who you first photographed last November 2019.
Right.
On the streets of New York.
Right.
Who instantly stole everybody's heart. And now you are 21 out of 32 so far of the story.
Did I just post 22? I posted it before
I'm sure people have tagged me.
I posted it right before we got on. I knew you were going to be mad because you didn't have time to read it. People have tagged me. By the time you go back to it, there's going to be 30 tags of my name on it. Like, have you seen this? I'm going to be like, don't worry, I was doing something even good. This is the most X-rated one. It was pretty wild.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, it's bad. Well, it's bad and good. it's good bad.
I got Brandon. You sent me a sneak peek. You will be proud to know I actually have not looked at the sneak peek at all. So I'm reading along with everybody else because I was like, I feel like we need to absorb this together as a people.
It's definitely the best way to do it.
It's the best way to do it. So I'm like, okay. I'm also waiting with bated breath. So tell me how this whole thing started and how you saw her last year.
Right. Coming back, what was so interesting about this particularly, it was outside the framework in which I've met everybody else through Humans of New York, which is while I'm out working with my camera, stopping random people. With Stephanie, who's her real name, I was coming home from the gym. I didn't have my camera with me. It was winter, or it was late November. It was cold. It was a cold day. And I was sweaty. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I'd just been off the treadmill, and I lived close enough to the gym that I just threw on a sweatshirt and I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I was almost home. Stephanie and I are neighbors. I was almost home, and I see this 76-year-old woman, coming toward me, and she's got this very outlandish coat on, that she made herself. And I just, she was really struggling to walk. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to, give her a compliment. I said, hey, you look great. You look great. And she said, let me ask you something. And she's calling me over. I'm laughing now because I know Stephanie so well. I was just like, it's so Steph. I should call her. Come here. Let me ask you something. Why is it that only white boys wear shorts in the winter? Why? And I just
the questions that we all have.
And I just started laughing. And then she just starts going, where do you live? And I go, over there. She goes, over there. back in the 1970s, that place used to be full of drug users, and it was the ghetto. It used to be full of drug users and whores and prostitutes back at that time I was doing. And she just launched into a story.
Like all Black women are prone to do. Yes, indeed.
Well, I mean, there's nothing. Stephanie is fascinating. It's one of her fascinating character quirks. Is like, instead of saying hello, she will tell you a story. Like it will launch into a story before she even greets you. Like she will be telling you some very detailed story about something that happened 30 years ago. That's just wild. And so that was it. And I'm just listening to her. I haven't said a word. All she did was ask me why I was wearing shorts. And it's like 8 minutes later, and we're way back in the 70s, and she's dancing. And I said, look, this is going to sound crazy, because this is somebody I know doesn't know what Humans in New York is. Like, I have a demographic and 76-year-old people who aren't on social media, not my demo normally. And so I said, look, this is going to sound crazy. I do something where I stop people and I talk to them and I learn their stories. Do you mind if I run back to my house and just get my camera? And I did, and I took her photo, and I was writing down the stuff she was saying. And she tells me now that she kind of just forgot about it. She's like, whatever. Some guy took a picture from me, probably some, kid doing a school project or something. And next thing she knows, she's just getting stopped on the street, like, oh my gosh, it's you, because the post went so viral. The stories, it just went nuts. And so then in the wake of that, she had so many people coming after her. Everybody wanted to know who the president was. And I was even talking with her last night. I go, Stephanie, you think we should tell, if we did tell who the president was, everybody in the world would reach us. Can't do it, not doing it. And I go,
what, did she tell you though?
Oh yeah, I know.
Tell Stephanie I need to know. I need to know. I don't have to tell nobody. I can be the vault. I don't have to tell nobody, but I want to know, Brandon.
Yeah, she goes, it's different. These people, these are powerful people. But anyway, so I completely lost my train of thought with
the thing went nuts. Everybody's following, looking for her.
Oh, I know. Okay, so there's like journalists like freaking her out, like parked out in front of her place. Stephanie's very hard to find because she's a very private person. Normally, journalists can
find anybody.
They can get your cell phone number in 10 seconds if they want it, and they'll just call you directly. But they were having a hard time finding her. And they were like studying the shot, trying to figure out exactly where it was. And there was this one guy from England that had been assigned by his editor to find out who the president was, just stalking her. All these people wanting to make movies on her and just wanting to meet with her. It's just nonstop. And at some point I was just like, man, like, I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories, and I've got this massive audience with Stephanie. That's the thing about Stephanie. Like, we've raised a lot of money for her, but I think she would trade all the money for being on stage in a second. She loves an audience. Stephanie loves an audience. And I had an audience. And so I said, and I was fascinated by her story. And so I was like, okay, why don't we put all these discussions on hold that you're having? And why don't we just tell your story on my blog? And at that point, Stephanie, she went from, being almost apartment bound to every time she walked out the door, having 20 people come up to her and want to take a selfie. So in her mind, she didn't know much about my website, but she liked what happens when she's on my website. And so she goes, that's what I want to do. I want to do that again. I want to go with you. And so we started meeting in the diner, met about 20 times. And I just transcribed this woman's story. Amazing. Like everybody else, like, there's just so many times. So I'm just like, I cannot believe I'm typing this. Like, I cannot believe I'm typing this. I cannot believe I'm typing this.
There's a few times that I'm like, I'm just wondering what Brandon's face looked like
when
she dropped this tidbit. Because
the storyteller, I just loved it. It's just like, oh my God, this is so good. This is so good. This is so good. I can't believe it. Like, it's just like when I'm just, because when I am just loving listening to a story, it's like, that's one thing I've learned for Humans of New York is that, like, you know, I'm the first audience member because I'm hearing the story for the first time. If I'm not crying, the audience is not going to cry. If I'm not laughing, the audience is not going to laugh. And so I was just so enthralled and laughing so loud at so many points of her story that I knew it was going to be, if I could get it, because I knew writing a 12,000 word story was not going to be the same as writing a, 250 word story. I knew it was going to be a big challenge. I struggled with it. I struggled and wrestled with it for months and months and months. I mean, it was 3 times as long as it was just 3 weeks ago. And because I was thinking about maybe even turning it into a book or a podcast. And this
I remember.
Yeah.
You told me about that.
Yeah. And I had to get it ready for the blog. And so I had to make some very tough decisions, which I think ended up being very good for the story itself of what to include. That's with somebody like Stephanie who's been through so much, the difficult part of storytelling isn't finding more information. It's taking, these hundreds of amazing memories and stories and giving them a single spine and a single thrust. It's a single journey. You want the audience to be on a single journey, and you need that to resolve at the end. And I never done that before. This is a new skill I was learning. You know what I mean? I felt like, and I was wrestling and struggling with it. And it went through so many drafts.
Were you your own editor in this process?
Yes, very much.
That's tough.
Yeah,
That's tough.
I would write it. I would write all my drafts, and then I would print them out, and I would go through with pencil, and I would write it again, and I'd write it again, and I'd write it again. And so, again, and the difficult part about being with Stephanie is she has so many stories. She's a vessel of 1,000,000 stories, and taking that 1,000,000 stories and finding the story. That is the challenge, and it was new for me. So I really, really struggled with it. And, in a way, it's like, again, the feeling that it's been a great week for me. It's been, it's kind of a mini version of what happened with Humans of New York. I went out on a limb and I tried something I've never done before. I was racked by doubt that it was going to work. I was racked by uncertainty and moments of, oh my gosh, I'm wasting my time. This is never going to work. This is never going to work. You can't post this on social media. Nobody's going to follow it. Like people will be following it for the first 3 posts, but then they're just going to move on. That's not how social media works. And by the time you get to post 32, there's going to be about 17 diehards left, and everybody else is on. So there's a lot of fear and uncertainty because this was months of my life that I spent on this. And there's like a lot of fear and uncertainty that it wasn't going to connect and it wasn't going to work. And seeing it work and seeing it connect and seeing you in every comment section, all these other people who are just like waiting for it. Like it's like such a, again, I was so doubtful and so, that was going to happen, and seeing it happen is such a good feeling. It's a joy. It's a joy for Stephanie. We've raised her a lot of money, but
listen, sis is a millionaire now. I was like, can we get there? And I'm like, sure enough, in 2 days, got there.
That was a big surprise as well. I knew we were going to raise her plenty of money, but this, the degree to which people connected and stepped up and helped her out was beyond my expectations, and that's been one great surprise of this.
I think she reminds us all of somebody that we know, our aunt, our grandmother, a family friend who we know they have been through some things. We don't know all their stories, but we were like, that person has seen some things. And she represents this person that we all connect to because we want them to finally win, and we want them to finally not have to have the crazy stories. The rest of their lives has been crazy. So hopefully now they're having ease. And I think for me, that's why I connected with her. And the moment I saw you post about her and I read her story, I was like,
Yeah, you loved Stephanie very early on. You were emailing me. You were one of those people. I told you, like, everybody was coming after Stephanie. The difference with you, though, is I'd seen your name following the blog for a while, and I knew you were a fan, and I was like, all right, well, once we're ready to do something, we're going to give it to Luvvie first, because this isn't somebody that just dropped out of the sky. Luvvie's been with us for a long time here. So yeah, you were always true. Yeah, you're always on the top of my list. So, well, whatever comes together, whatever it's going to be, I'm going to let Luvvie know first, which is why I contacted you and I sent you the early draft. And yeah,
I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, because it was
epic.
Love. It wasn't opportunism. It was coming from love. It was coming from love,
man. Authenticity, man. I was like, yo, no, like this woman. And I also knew that in that moment, because I know what happens when people go viral very quickly. Is that everybody wants a piece of them in a way that's like, how can I get something from them? And I was like, I can't imagine how many offers she's getting and people being like, I want to do this thing. And I'm really glad that she kind of had you to steward that moment and this moment.
Yeah, well, but I was second guessing myself too, because like, okay, I kind of said, all right, let's do this story together. And 4 months later, she has this horrible health crisis, or several months later, she has this horrible health crisis. She hasn't gotten any money from her story yet. You know what I mean? Because our plan was we were going to do podcasts and I was going to give her the money from it. That was the plan. And now, she turned away all these movie producers, to work with me, and to flesh the story out with me. And now she's in this horrible situation. I wasn't finished with the story yet. I still had a long ways to go. Then I started kind of doubting myself. Was I a good steward? You know what I mean? Should I have just told her to take the very first check that was given to her? Obviously in the end, it turned out that, Humans of New York was by far the best way to tell her story. I mean, she wasn't going to get this kind of money, this kind of support, this kind of community around her in any other way. And everything else is still on the table. She's everybody's coming back. Of
course they are. It's her more.
It's her moment again. And so it all worked out well in the end. But there were times where I was questioning. Ethics are a tricky thing. You never know what the right, it's not always clear what the right thing to do. So I was having my own moment, was like, did I do an was I selfish to want to tell this story? Should I have just told her to take the first check that she could get? And so there were moments where I was worried that I'd done her wrong in that way. And I'm, very glad, obviously, that in the end, it turned out to be the right thing.
So is she reading the comments? How is she like keeping up with this the series right now?
I mean, hilariously, so much of it comes from my daily calls with her, my updates. Like, she gets on. She's actually been remarkably disciplined about it. She said like she spent one day reading nothing but comments, and she said she can't do that again. So she's kind of I think she'll get on there occasionally. She's just on Facebook, not on Instagram, and I tell her. I said, like, because she thinks it's the biggest thing in the world, and all she can see is Facebook. And I'm just like, take what you're seeing on Facebook and multiply it by 2, and that's what's happening on. Yeah. So, she's and again, she loves it. It's very good for her. She was in a dark place. And now she's in a very hopeful place, in a very energized place. She's got all these ideas. She's got all these business ideas of things that she wants to do now. She's one of the things that she wants to make masks, and she wants to call it Tanqueray's Masquerade. Because Tanqueray loves to sew, like Stephanie loves to sew, and she's very good at it. And so she's got all these ideas. She wants to plan these.
Tell her I'll be a brand ambassador she needs.
Yeah, she wants to give burlesque tours now. I mean, keep in mind, she can't get out of her wheelchair. And she's like, that's not, she's in her mind, she's going to be in heels in a week and doing all this stuff. So, I mean, it's good that mind before body. So she's hopefully hopefully her body will follow her will and her imagination, and she'll get up and at them soon.
What does this money allow her to now do? Especially, I know she was in crisis before.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, crisis. It was bad. It was bad. And so the first thing, it just takes that stress off her. I mean, just, yeah, it was bad. So stability first, health second. You know, maybe health should be first. I mean, she's got some major health needs. We need to take her. I'm trying to get her benefits, and it was a mess. It was a mess, and she had nobody helping her. And so now I've been trying to help her with all this stuff. So it's like, not only are we getting her money, we're trying to get her on the grid. That's like big. We're trying to get her on the grid.
Okay.
And then like she hasn't been able to get out of her apartment. So it's like we've had a doctor come look at her in the apartment, but she needs some serious self-care, like some experts. So that's next. And then now she'll be able to do that. And so like once we get her healthy again, then it'll, for me, I want the money to like take care of the worst case scenario, like I would love her to be walking in 3 weeks, and, just be able to, use the money, the terms of the trust or her living expenses, but that's a broad word. I know the audience's intent is to make Stephanie's life, comfortable and happy.
Yes.
So I'm not, trying to, put limits on how she can, provide for her own life and enjoy her own life. But what I want the fundraiser to do is prepare for the worst case scenario, which is, what if she can't walk again? What if she needs round the clock home health service? That's $5,000 a week. It's $250,000 a year. I hopefully we can get her on insurance, and that'll help. Like, I honestly I'm learning all this for the first time.
Right.
And it's just like, I don't know how much of that. All I know is it's coming out of my pocket right now. Like, I don't know how much healthcare or insurance will provide. And then if she does have to go to a home, those homes in New York are insane. They're like $8,000 to $10,000 a year. And these are just for the basics, like, forget anything she might want. This is just what she's going to need. She lives another 15 or 20 years. I mean, she is a very, very, strong-willed woman. You know what I mean? That's going to be extremely expensive. If she lives another 10 years, it's going to be extremely expensive, which is one thing I was reminding the audience of today. It's like $1.3 million, sounds like a ton of money, but when somebody is as disabled as she is and needs as much attention as she does, I mean, that can get zapped very fast. So that's the main goal. Is I want to put a safety net under her that prevents her from ever falling into a desperate situation again. Mm-hmm. Obviously the ideal situation, she gets healthy. She doesn't live an extravagant life at all. She gets healthy. She lives off the interest of the trust very comfortably, and it gets passed on to the charity that she's chosen. And it's a wonderful thing for everybody.
Yes.
But my main concern is protecting the downside. And so that's what I think the main purpose of the money raise.
So you've been managing a lot of this yourself, and you've been spending your own money for her care. Right. In these months.
And Humans of New York is audience supported, and I have a Patreon, and I think it's kind of unspoken. The reason that people give to the Patreon is to support Humans of New York, but the people who give to my Patreon know that a large amount, probably a majority of it, goes to helping out people that I tell their stories that are in a place of need. I call it my money, but it's coming from the Humans of New York Patreon. But even the Patreon would not be enough to support it long term, because it's, what she needs is so expensive. She needs healthcare now, like big time. She doesn't have Medicaid. She doesn't have Medicare. So it's like, do you just let her suffer, or do you pay it out of pocket? You know what I mean? So it's just like, the getting her on her feet, getting her kind of stable took a lot of resources and a lot of time. Now we've got a nice system. We've got her, we have her home health aide that comes every single day, that she likes, and she likes.
Because you know, if she didn't like them, she would be totally lambasting that person.
Yes. Yes. And so we've got her in a good place now. And so we've got a nice place to build on. And so things are looking good. Things are looking good for everybody. I had a talk with her last night, and I was just like, this is just, things are really great. The story is so beautiful. And it's just like, I've always thought it was beautiful, but seeing people react to it, it's like, yeah, it really, really is beautiful. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's going, and you don't even know, you know where it's going, but it's going just somewhere very tender and, it's going, there's all these like wild kind of anecdotes involved, but, the underlying, heart and soul of the story is something very tender and tragic in a lot of ways. And yeah, it's a very beautiful story and a very beautiful life.
Roberta was right. Everybody was like, Roberta was right. Okay. She came in, she did come into some big money. All right. I mean, my hope is that we get it to $2 million.
Yeah. I mean, my hope is too. And I think the last third of the story is when Tanqueray kind of gives way to Stephanie. And it becomes anchored in a very real and place where, I'll let you see. I'll let it unfold. But
I'm like, how many more days are you gonna do? Because we have 10 more stories.
I think I'm gonna post the last post on Monday. And then there will probably be a little bit of epilogue about what's come through the storytelling itself, which is great. So that's how I see it right now.
I love it. And then, so you have a book coming out. Brandon sent me the art that he apologized for over and over again.
Oh, you've got the ARC.
I got the art, the advanced reader copy. This is before.
Hold on, my computer is actually sitting on the book. Hold on. I'm using it to set up. So here's the actual hardcover. So they look very, yeah. So I'm excited about that. That's another, it's a big couple weeks for me with Tanqueray, and it was going to be big even without Tanqueray because the book was coming out. So this is it's been eventful.
How are you finding pockets of joy and peace in these moments?
Oh, I mean, first of all, I just try to be very grateful for everything that's happened every single step of the way. I try to take a long walk in a quiet place and just be like, gosh, dang, like it's just so amazing what's happened in your life. And, the privilege of doing Humans of New York, the privilege of being able to tell stories to so many people, it's just like, I think that's the foundation of peace, and the foundation of happiness is gratitude, and just to be very thankful for everything. And that's how I've been this week. It's really not pockets for me. It's, it's like, this entire week's been really a delight for me. It's just been the privilege of telling the story, the privilege of sharing Tanqueray, her life, and bringing so many people on this journey. It's a massive privilege, and it just feels great. It feels wonderful. And I'm enjoying it. And I'm very happy.
You don't necessarily put your opinions on Humans of New York or your thoughts and all that good stuff, but I actually think that you're reflected in the work a bit, because ever since Humans of New York started, you've made sure to tell stories of the world as it is. Like, Humans of New York was never like all white people and all straight people. It was, This is the world, this is everybody in their different ways, and every story is valid. And I actually think that is an opinion, and I think it's an amazing one.
Well, that's thank you. It's like, whenever people do ask about my opinions, I'll always just go back to the work, like you said. And I guess it is an opinion. It's like, my opinion is the less I'm in it, the better it is. You know what I mean? And that's my opinion.
It's amazing. Like this, listen, like I'm going to go through the book. I'm going to get the actual hard copy.
Yeah, you got the one with the black and white photos. That's the early advance. So it's the I'll send you one with the full color hardcover. I'll write you a little note. I got like a box of them right here that I'm also resting my computer on. So you'll get one of the first ones. I'll draw a little picture in there of the Tanqueray. I'll get Tanqueray to sign it too.
Listen,
I know. Oh well, I wish it was if it was pre-pandemic days. Me and Tanqueray we'd post up in Barnes and Noble in Union Square and have an event, and we just sign books for hours, the two of us. And I know no more people would be there for her than me, and I wouldn't care. Yeah,
you were definitely coming for Stephanie. You were gonna be like, "Listen, that's babe."
I know, and she wouldn't let me hear the end of it.
I would love to interview her too.
My line and your line, did you see that?
Look, flex. She gonna be flexing on you, Brandon.
Yeah. So.
No, I think she's brilliant, and I think listen, my goal is to one day interview her. Also, tell her I'm a huge fan, and however way, what do you think is most helpful for people to do right now that will help both your platform and Stephanie?
All right. Well, on the, Stephanie, the very obvious one is we've got the GoFundMe going right now. But just read her story. That's a big one. I mean, again, like I tell you, I think that matters to her more than dollars is, having people read her story. And that means a lot to her. And she loves that aspect of it probably more than anything financial that comes from it. If you'd like to, help, with her care, the GoFundMe is going on for a few more days. As far as Humans of New York, I think the two biggest but I'm the same way as Stephanie. It's like, you want to make me happy, just read the blog, read my work. Like that's by far number one. As far as supporting it materially, I have a Patreon and I also sell books. So those are always the two ways to support the blog is to buy a book or join the Patreon. So if you'd like to do that as well, you are welcome. And it would be.
And what do you think is the thing you're proudest of because of this platform?
Thing I'm proudest of. I'm proudest of. I had a talk with my friend last night about this, and just. We were talking about how, like, even billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, if you had $10 billion, wouldn't necessarily be able to buy the ability to create transformation in people's lives. And through the stories that are told on Humans of New York, I am in a position to tell stories that will give somebody the piece of wisdom or the piece of connection or the piece of comfort that they need that can provide a transformative moment in their lives at a very important moment. And, having the ability through my art and through my hard work to have such a pivotal importance in certain moments in so many lives is the privilege and the honor of a lifetime. And I think that's probably what I'm proudest of.
Boom. That's a good way to drop the mic. Brandon, this has been an honor, a pleasure, and just incredible. And I'm so glad I got to interview you. Always a fan. You will see me in the comments, sharing on Lady Tanqueray. And I'm crying along with everybody else. So
thanks, Luvvie.
Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Bye. Yo, that interview energized me in such a way. Brandon was so vulnerable. We usually see him behind the lens. Well, we usually don't see him. But now to hear his story, to know about the man behind the pictures, yo, what an honor. I think I am most thankful for that piece he said about not letting his weaknesses bring down his work. That's significant because as artists and as people in the world who have imposter syndrome, whatever it is, oftentimes we get in the way of our best work. We get in the way of being the people who can create transformative change. It's just, I'm just such a fan. I'm such a fan. He just made me even more of a fan. Be sure to follow Brandon's work on social media. He is at Humans of NY on Instagram and Humans of New York on Facebook. And be sure to check out his new book, Humans. It comes out October 6th. Support the good work that he's doing out here in this world. Keep reading his stories. Join his Patreon. I know I'm a part of his Patreon. And let's just keep supporting storytellers like Brandon and beyond. Storytellers who even don't have the privilege that he has and who might just be getting started. And I think that's at the core of what he's doing, is that all the stories that we want to tell are valid. If you love this interview, if you got anything out of it, please share this with everybody. Be loud about them listening to this episode of Rants and other ones, because Brandon is an incredible guest, but we've also had some other amazing ones. So yeah, looking forward to having you loud it all over the place. Much love to Chicago Recording Company, who I've been partnering with from the start of this podcast, and they've been such a huge help putting together my recordings, bringing y'all the radio voice. Thank you for listening to Rants Randomness. One quick thing you could do to help new listeners find our show is first to make sure you're subscribed to Rants and Randomness in your podcast platform of choice. Second, make sure you rate the show and leave a comment with a review, whether you're listening in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher. And finally, please share those insights and mic drop moments on social media, and be sure to tag us. We are at Rants and Randomness on Instagram and Rants Randomness on Twitter. No and there. As always, you can follow me on social media. I am at Luvvie everywhere. See you on the next episode.